Hi, my name is Sebastian. I worked on Kambo. I was the director of photography and one of the producers.
Awesome.
Yeah, my name is Mark Paden, and I shot, directed, and edited that other film, the one with the birds.
That other film. Oh, come on, Mark. God's enduring song of love, right?
Yes,
Or
yes.
okay, yeah. Um, all right. So I'll start off, Sebastian, with you. So Cambo, this was like a complex story. How long did it take from start to finish?
Well, the script was actually written, I would say, last October.
Okay.
Um, and then pre-production started in January. It was actually something that we did as a part of a class, but it was for the director Finn. He wrote it and directed it. It's been something that he's been wanting to do for a while. A lot of themes that he wanted to incorporate for a while, and it kind of led all into him writing the script, which was actually for our screenwriting class. And then the main producer, his name is Jeff. This was for his film business class, where he had to produce film over the course of the semester. So really, start to finish, October up until recently, actually, just last week, we had the finishing touches on it. But production itself was only 2 days.
Wow. Okay. So when did you, or I guess, Finn as well, first hear about the ritual that was referenced in your film?
I think Finn. I think it's something that he found just on a YouTube video. I think it was sometime right before he wrote the script. He just found something about this ritual in YouTube video, and there's a lot more to it than what was included in the film. But he
Mm.
was just like so fascinated by it, and he's like, "This is so weird and crazy. So let's make a film about it."
Yeah, and just one more question before I head to Mark. What's the driving theme, you and the other filmmakers involved with the film, the driving theme that you hope the audience took from after watching your film?
Well, something that Finn and I talked about was um, trying to portray the idea of lots of normal people have really crazy things happen to them, but a lot of people like don't really like use that experience to further their life experience or change their behaviors afterwards. Even
Hmm.
kind of as humans, we sometimes crazy things happen to us and we just take it for granted or we just move on without really reflecting on it. So something Finn especially wanted to include in this film was kind of to push the idea of life's kind of crazy sometimes, so we should kind of look back and learn from what we've experienced, but also move forward and know and recognize those experiences when they come.
Yeah, wow, wow, that's pretty deep. Mark, I'll head to you. Please tell us the location where you filmed. Where you filmed? What location did you capture all those beautiful birds and that beautiful scenery?
Yeah, so where would you guess if you had to venture a guess?
Maybe Florida. Florida, maybe.
Not a bad guess. So, not a bad guess. We actually filmed it in southern Texas. So,
Hmm.
this one was part of a larger campaign that we were working on with the Geoscience Research Institute for a big advertising campaign that they were doing. And as
Hmm.
part of that, we were shooting a bunch of small, of shorter documentaries, like 1 minute. Um, but then I really needed some bird footage. So that week that I had to film it, there was a ton of rain coming through where I was.
Mm.
So I just drove to the closest place outside of the rain that I could get to and started filming these birds. The whole day was rubbish. I mean, I haven't used a single other clip from that entire day. And then right at about sunset, I went back to this little lake and there were these birds flying up in the air doing their murmurations, and it was just gorgeous. So I started filming it, and the funny thing was, it was actually a terrible day. It was all gray and cloudy, but I got some of those key shots of the birds flying up. Then a few days later, I was like, I really want to go back and get that when the sun is out. So we drove back down there. It was like 3 or 4 hours from where we were living at the time, and Yeah, beautiful sunset, and that's where we captured most of the visuals. Except they didn't actually fly in the sky at that point. They didn't actually murmurate. So we had to splice them together and do some fairly hefty color grading to change gray into orange. But
Wow. And how long did that take, that color correction?
um, the initial part not too long. Trying to get the blacks clean was the toughest part.
Okay.
Because it's very easy to get them orange, but then trying to separate them from the two in DaVinci, especially it was also a bit of a higher ISO, and red doesn't exactly love high ISO. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, that took a little bit of doing.
Wow. And people in the audience, be sure to think of questions and raise your hand if you have any questions for the filmmakers. Mark, so let's talk about the gear that you used. I was
Yeah.
also really intrigued about the aerial shots. I assumed drone, but can you talk about what you
Mhm.
used for to capture your images?
Yeah, so the main rig is this guy, my red Dragon X 6K. For that project, we also rented was it like a 200 to 400 millimeter with the 1.4 times adapter on it. So we were also shooting in 4K just so we could capture as high of a frame rate as we could.
Yeah.
So at 4K crop on a 600 millimeter lens, I think we're up towards like around 1,000 millimeters. So it gave us a little bit more
Wow.
punch to really get in and capture some of those. Especially, I think my favorite shots, and really a lot of what I do is actually marketing. So
Mhm.
when I get to do stuff that's just purely aesthetic and feeling driven, it's kind of nice. But with this one, a lot of the structure and a lot of the detail isn't immediately apparent. And one of the things that is really my favorite about it, and some of the equipment allowed us to capture this, is starting with that solitary bird, just in that stillness, building up to this crescendo of them flying in the air, and then tapering back down again to that one solitary bird as the sun is setting. And yeah, all that to say that having some of those longer lenses definitely helps quite a bit. And then yeah, we also had a drone flying up in the air. I was actually really hoping that the drone would scare them up and they would start murmurating again, but sadly it didn't work.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if at any point you disrupted the birds as you were trying to capture your footage, but at one point you at least wanted to, it seems.
Yeah, as probably unethical as that might be, yes. Slightly unethical.
And had you, well, let me see if anyone, don't see any hands. I'm sure, come on, I'm sure somebody has some questions. Okay, I see Stephen Crary has a question. If you can turn on your, oh, there you go.
Hello, hello. Thank you for sharing both of the films. They were really, really interesting, crazy to watch. And Mark, you totally blew my mind. I actually had to go back and rewatch um, some of those shots. I thought it was full blown sunset. So the fact that you met incorporating blew my noggin. That's
Yeah.
pretty insane. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then also just the visuals, Sebastian, with your film. Just the lighting is just very beautiful with all your rim lights and whatnot. So, I guess I'm catering my question to you both is towards lighting. Um, did you shoot, Mark? Did you shoot towards the end of the day, or was it just midday shooting? And then for you, Sebastian, what did the lighting look like? How did you maintain those crispy blacks and also kind of lean into this aesthetic that you were going for?
Yeah. So as far as time of the day, I think everything was shot during golden hour, except for those few murmuration shots where they were at golden hour, but it was, not golden. So yeah, but that's as far as lighting is concerned, that is one place where it does get a little bit more tricky right towards the end of that time. Um, Usually I can shoot the red right up until blue hour, and I've never had I've never liked a shot as much as I do on the red at Blue Hour. But just with the really high frame rates, I was getting a little bit tricky. So yeah.
Yeah, for Kambo, I knew lighting was going to be really important for the film when I read the script, because it had some specific action lines. I don't know if it was entirely noticeable on Vimeo. I think also we could have executed it a little bit better. But our gaffer Sid, he did some amazing work with the DMX, and we had the luxury of shooting in a studio, so we had a lot of flexibility with the lighting. But towards the beginning, there's like a fade down of kind of the practicals and most of the lights in the room, and then a fade up. We used a Lico like on Steven, our actor, and then on the frog. So we faded up those as we faded the house lights down, and we did some things like that. And yeah, like shooting, like we shot in the same studio. We were able to shoot some black void stuff, like at the end where he's painted all green. Thankfully, we had access to an Alexa. That was super awesome. A blessing to be able to shoot with an Alexa. It was a lot of fun, and we shot in ProRes 4x4, so a lot of information. Kind of sucked in the post side of it, but I'm glad we did it because we had some room for color grade. You know, I think there's more work that needs to be done on the color grade, but I think it just inherently the Alexa looks really nice. So.
Your question, Stephen. So, if there are any questions, I have more. Mark, was this your first time shooting wildlife, so to speak, animals out in nature?
No, actually. So, part of one of my major clients the last couple of years has been a science organization, and so it's given me a lot of opportunities to shoot films of wildlife. A lot of what I actually have done is underwater, which is
Oh,
even
wow.
more fun. Yeah, I quite enjoy that. It's kind of nice to have a work schedule of, you know, waking up, relaxing, going down to the beach, diving for a few hours, and then coming back out. I don't mind that production schedule at all. But yeah, stuff like that has been a decently large part of my job for the last couple of years.
Awesome. Wow. And when you said underwater, that just made me think of my brother who's starting up his underwater photography. So I'm going to chat
Nice.
with you about that
Absolutely.
afterwards.
Absolutely.
And how do you find your gigs, your freelance,
Yeah.
and, you know, what's that process like for you?
Yeah. So honestly, I accidentally succeeded before I knew what I was doing.
Okay.
So the really the most important thing that has helped me has just been networking and forming relationships at different in-person gatherings. Remember those? But yeah, just I worked with an organization for a few years that had a fairly large impact, and so I met a lot of people through there and just built relationships. I mean, to the point where like right now this week I'm in meetings for a fairly sizable contract with somebody that I met several years ago at one of those events. So to me, it's just been a lot about building relationships, and not even necessarily intentionally building relationships, but for money to get out of it, but just to know people, just to form friendships that at some point might turn into something, right? So that's part of what I do for my gigs. The other thing is I've really specialized in the area of online marketing. Not so much running the ads, but creating them. I found that most of us, when we start out as filmmakers, we really niche down into lighting and cinematography and gear, and kind of ignore some of the really big elements that the market is wanting right now. And I found there's quite a lot of people who are running ads, who are selling different products online, et cetera, who need content that is on brand and really going to work well. So with that, a lot of where I find those is online, you know, just basically doing what I did in person, but online. So a long way of saying a lot of networking.
Yeah. But that's great for up and coming filmmakers to hear. There's no getting around network.
No.
So,
Honest,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Sorry to
I
cut
was
you
just
off.
gonna say, and honestly, I think I overcomplicated it in my mind when I was starting out, thinking like, oh, it's business. It's just this complicated thing. But now that I have my own, what I've really found is that you really only have three main components. You have to have a good product or service. You have to be good at what you do. You have to network well. You have to tell the people. You have to tell the market about what you do, and you have to know your numbers. You have to price yourself right. And as long as you do those three things, you can be successful. It's not that complicated. There's a lot of different ways of figuring out those things. Like your way of talking to me, people might be DMing people on Instagram. It might be LinkedIn. It might be, talking to neighbors. It might be like another contract that I just signed is literally from a guy that I go climbing with on the weekends. So it's like, no matter how you're doing it, it's really all about those three keys. And that would be the biggest thing I would say to people who are starting out on it.
Nice. It's very helpful. Sebastian, one last question for you, unless we see some more audience questions. What was your favorite and then also least favorite moments of production?
Um, Man, yeah, production was pretty intense.
Especially since it was over this COVID year,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that was a
Tell me
big
about it.
concern. Yeah, the school had some specific rules in place that we needed to follow, and that was important to me especially. I was very concerned and still am about COVID safety. So I think in general it was. I think some of our worst moments were, having people on set who also weren't students at at Southern, so
Mm,
they weren't allowed to touch the gear, and they weren't familiar as much with the code rules that we had. So sometimes myself or our AD Jeff, who was also the producer, would have to step in and be like, "Hey, you can't do this. I'm sorry." And it was uncomfortable and it was awkward and it's just a tough
yeah.
situation that we created. But some of the better moments, I think definitely the last scene where he's painted green because it was just like so crazy and weird that we're doing this. I was just like, we're all just kind of standing there, just like, what are we doing here? Like, how did we get to this point? And it's just like the whole time that we were like so focused on like, oh yeah, we got to make this cool film, we got to execute this well, and then all of a sudden we're just like, wait a second, this guy's painted green. Like, what are we doing? And also too, like at the end with the hands on the glass. When it fell out of the frame, it was actually an accident, but we only had one take, so or like one chance to do it. So we were just like, all right, we'll put it in the film. It's kind of cool. So,
Nice. Love it when those things work out. Man, that's awesome. If I don't see any more, oh, just in the nick of time, Jerry Hartman has a question.
Yeah, Mark, I was just wondering, you said that last element of a simple business plan is know your numbers, right? Do you have
Yes.
some things that you could talk to, college students about as far as mistakes maybe you made in the past that you could help them
Yep.
not make? I mean, how do you figure out right as you're starting to work with clients what that is and figuring out where you are in the marketplace?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a phenomenal question and definitely something that I wish I had known sooner. Um, I think the first thing is, and I'm going to say two things that are going to kind of fight against each other. Um, the first thing is when somebody is starting out, you don't want to overprice yourself. I've been there's a individual that I've been giving him some tips and stuff over the years, and his quality is such that I would not give him the advice that I'm about to give. So this is all predicated in make sure that your stuff has a baseline level of quality to it. But the biggest thing that I wish I had known earlier is that I shouldn't try to justify my prices based on how I think they should be. I need to let the market tell me how much they want to pay me. For instance, I might think, okay, my time is worth so much money because I had this much gear, et cetera, et cetera. And based on that, I'm just gonna give myself just enough so I can drive my prices as low as possible so I can get this client. It's like, if that's what you're having to do to get that client, you probably don't want that client. It's much better to say, okay, based on this client, and this is where you're going to have to know some details about them. How much do they stand to gain from this? Like, if they stand to gain $100,000, you don't want them to pay you $200, you know, or 1,000. Like, if they stand to gain $100,000, 10% is not an irrational number to have for that, right? So going in, kind of having some of those details in mind, thinking, okay, how much do they stand to gain from this? And then pricing based on that, rather than just saying, okay, I want to be paid $20 an hour or $50 an hour. So really letting the market tell you. So as far as a practical of how I will often approach that, I start by I don't sell my technical skills to capture video. I sell an end result. I sell the result saying, okay, I'm going to give you a set of film assets that will be tailored to the specific outcome you're looking for. And based on that, that's the value. And it's going to be super high quality, right? So they're not paying me to come. They're not in the mindset of, okay, I need to pay an hourly worker to come in and do this. So once I have that, then I'm trying to assess where are they, how much do they want to spend in this? And oftentimes I'll ask them for a budget, then to make sure, or how much they want to spend on it. Then to make sure that I'm effectively playing the money game. What I'll end up doing is I'll send 3 different budget options in a proposal. It's a really professional, well laid out proposal, and I have kind of on their low end, medium end, and then high end. It's usually outside of what they've already said is their budget. That way, I'm not going to lose them if they really don't have a huge budget, and I'm not going to cheat myself and leave money on the table if they're actually willing to go a lot higher. So all of that's kind of complicated to a simple question, but yeah, really making sure that you're letting the market tell you how much they want to pay, and going after the jobs that have money in them. It's like, it's super fun to do short films that are super creative, but it's like, for me, and this is why I've niched down into marketing, it's like, there's a bunch of people who will pay good money for you to make a really effective ad that makes their product look amazing. They have money, they want to pay it, you know? So finding the market that actually has the money to give is a really important part of that. So
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you. Great question.
I hope everyone took copious notes with all of the gems that Mark just dropped, true insight from time working, finding gigs, and just assessing your own value. And that was just all tremendous advice to give to students. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Sebastian and Mark.